Good morning. How are you doing on this chilly autumn, winter day, I suppose it's heading towards now, isn't it? Hope you're doing well. This is your Yoga Solutions Live with me, Marc J Acquaviva, on, it's chilly Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2019. Yes, I hope you're having a wonderful time wherever you are, and yes, so how am I doing? I have a little catch up before I get started because I've that's what I feel like doing. Life is good. I'm loving using my studio, and I'm getting more and more interested in the sort of filming side of this online stuff, because my online presence, my online courses seem to be really well received, and going rather well. And actually, I've got my certificates ready for the Haptic Intelligence course attendees. Amazing time. And what always amazes me about this work is, now I've been talking about similar things for nearly 20 years, and I've never once got bored, because it's constantly evolving but staying the same. It's hard to explain. It's maybe it's a function of principle-based work, where because it's not like you apply the principles and then that's the end of the yoga. The application of the principles is a moment-by-moment practice, and what the ramifications of applying those principles seems to ramp up in a kind of exponential fashion. So you're applying yourself to the same ideas, but as sensitivity, as accuracy of relationship, as accuracy of interpretation actually improves, then the outcome of applying simple things like non-violence to your own practice leads to astounding results, more and more astounding results. And what I get from repeating, going through the content again with a group of people, is I get even more clear, because I'm responding to their questions and complications that seem to arise for them, and usually it's a complication in thinking, and so I have to become incredibly clear as a result. So amazing stuff. I've really enjoyed myself, and I'm really looking forward to the next one, the Proprioceptive Intelligence Series. Anyway, I will speak more about that later. First off, let's get going with the yoga. So I have a question from Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. I don't know what I'd do without you. You always come up with rather good questions. So Barbara's on the course up in Scotland, and anyway, anything for the upper back and heart area, and she says, I'm trying to connect my upper spine to my lower spine. Very good intention there. Very good thing to try and do. Okay. The upper back, the dorsal spine, the upper thoracic spine, the rounded part of your back, the bit of the spine behind your heart. And it's it's a key area. It's a very important area. So what can we do? Let's see. Give me a moment just to settle in and tune in. And because Barbara asked the question, I'm sort of tuning into what I know about her movement and what I can remember about her physicality. Okay, so yes. Moving from the upper spine, it's kind of the holy grail, if you like. The rounded part of the back between the anything that protrudes at the back. So from the bump of the base of the neck down to probably T10 or so, T9. The thoracic rib cage, the thoracic spine is part of the rib cage, hence thoracic, and so it has 12 vertebrae roughly. Not exactly. It has 12 vertebrae, and yes, there's a rounded part in the middle, and there's sort of potential to extend from the base. And what I'm thinking, from my own physicality, and for majority of people, I would say that when we try to extend from the upper spine, when we try to move from there, it's difficult. It's difficult. It's kind of, the rounded part of the back is usually where most of us carry our weight when we slump, and the top of it is where we carry the weight of the head, and when we slump off into a roundness, which is perfectly natural to relax, but when we get heavy with that, then it's the sort of mid-thoracic spine that is basically carrying our weight whilst we hang off it. And then when we become upright, this is the problem. When we become upright, we do it with our secondary curves. We lift with our lumbars and we lift with our necks. Now, I suppose if you lift hard enough at both ends and stick with it, then that extension might eventually travel up higher to a more rounded part of the spine. But if you're lifting at both ends, what's more likely to happen is, because you've succeeded in coming up, because you've succeeded in extending, and the means with which you have managed to do so, as in sort of closing the secondary curves at the back, the result will be that the rounded part is actually cut off from movement by that very action. That's more likely. The lifting using your lumbars or the lifting using your neck actually blocks off any possibility of movement in the rounded part of the spine. So that's the beginning of the complication. And every time you want to go for open-heartedness, rather than extending from the heart, which is kind of what we need to do, we tend to lift at the beginning straight away and lift with the head, lift the body, and just keep going. And what I was saying originally was, maybe if you're young enough and persistent enough, maybe that if you keep hanging out in that extension, it will continue through to the center of the thoracic spine. And maybe you see that in very young gymnasts and that sort of thing, but it's not healthy, because you're relying on squishing the spine at the back to get there. So that you're relying on the closing of the intervertebral joints at the back to get there. Yes, and it's not satisfying. So anyway, that's the problem. What's the solution? Gosh. Yes, when I talk about what people normally do, I sort of get a bit lost, because it seems like a long journey to do things differently. But the reality is, you can do things differently if you change instantly, if you can, first of all, let go of how you always do things. Because, like I said, the lifting with the secondary curves prevents the dorsal spine from naturally moving. Actually, the dorsal spine moves quite simply when you're supported by touch, so that you have core responsiveness for these two secondary curves, so that they are not, so they are supported. Then the breathing allows a deflation within the rib cage. Of course, the release of the breath allows that, and as well as the chest dropping, if you think of it as a three-dimensional sort of pressure system rather than lift and drop, inhale, exhale, the lungs fill and the rib cage fills because of that, expands because of it. And then when the release of the breath happens, if it happens concentrically, if it happens from all directions equally, then there's the potential for a kind of deflationary movement of the upper spine. So that's me breathing wide into my ribs. Try this, and put one hand on your breastbone, one hand up your back so you can feel what happens to the rounded part of the spine. And if you are supported enough by your touch, I would invite you to press down very slightly through your base, just to get some core responsiveness going on in the core of the body, so that the lumbars aren't holding you up, or the neck. And then there's the potential feeling of breathing into those areas. And then if you can pause for a second with the breath held, then what we can do is we can sort of aim the release to happen away from the throat, so the chest drops, but also the spine, the ribs behind you drop. You kind of, it's about letting go, it's not about doing. It's about leaving yourself sort of floating in space, in the back of the neck and the back of the waist from your inhale efforts, if you like. So you stay in that relationship to the space behind you in a relaxed kind of way, and your job is to let go of tension through to your engaged base, so that the body falls away from the head, not just the chest, but behind you as well. And if you manage not to control things with your head, then you might start to feel the tiniest of movements in the upper spine. If you can find that, then you've got the answer. If you can't find that, it's because you're in the lift and collapse version of the breath, where and that happens because you're not feeling supported. So there's, if that's the case, then we need to give you a situation where physically you need to support yourself in a way that invites the breath to move differently. And setting up for Cobra is quite a good one, good practice. Because if you have your ribs on the ground, I'm talking about the lower front ribs, if you're relaxing the head, it'll be heavy. But there's two ways of coming up in this posture. The most common way people do it is by shortening the spine and lifting, which goes with the sort of usual way of doing things, and then people will quite naturally tighten their pelvic floors and push their pubis into the ground to prevent anything nasty happening. My way of doing things would be entirely different. It would be looking for support from your touch, so it would be your knees, which would make your pelvis light actually. But as long as the belly didn't feel like it was heavy towards the ground, so the touch of the knees invites you to, if you work with it, sort of down through the knees and wide from it, then it helps a hollowing out in the pelvis and broadening across the back of the waist. That is the breath. And don't be surprised if this is hard work. And then the release of the breath, if you can stay feeling supported by your touch, which is the knees and wide from it, then the release of the breath will help the belly empty, and the base of the spine, sacrum, gets to drop through the pelvis. It's not you pulling the pelvis down to the ground. The pelvis remains light because of your touch, and the sacrum gets to sort of rest inwards. The only reason for bothering with this end of things really is to stop the habit of the lumbars collapsing and the pelvis being sort of lifted by the sacrolumbar junction as a result. With the release of the breath, it's just unsupportive. And then if you use your arms to push up, then you hurt yourself. Well, you might not, but it won't be nice for the spine. it's we want to get away from closing the spine here and get a sense of extension happening from the thoracic spine, which is the spine between the bump of the base of the neck and a bit below the heart. So how do we do that? Well, in the same way that you invite a lightness in the pelvis from the touch of the knees, and a sort of supportive relationship to breathing, then you can find a lightness in the head, but from the touch of the ribs. So even if I forget about this end, even if I forget about the leg end, if I'm sort of with the ground underneath the ribs, and I give the ribs, if I give that relationship between me and the ground at the ribs the job of supporting my head, then what I do is I press down through the ribs. Okay, so pressing down through the ribs is one thing, but I also want it to support me as I breathe. So pressing down through the ribs needs to feel like it invites the breath into the back of my neck. And if you're following this, you will feel, I think, if you're following the instruction and you're not surreptitiously lifting your head, if you're supported by the downward action of the ribs, something of the core and the diaphragm working together is involved with supporting you. So it's the breath itself, the expansion of the ribs, the diaphragm, that sort of thing is giving you the possibility of sort of floating this weight, the head, from the purchase of the ribs on the ground. When you're doing that, be careful not to pull the pelvis down. Instead, be with the touch of your knees. So don't worry if the pelvis is up. Don't worry about having a lumbar spine. The thing is, you shouldn't be collapsing into it. That's all. So, hard work. Hard work with not much to show for it. But if you stay with the practice, the pressing down of the ribs, allowing the back of the neck, the scruff of the neck to breathe, you could possibly even get it in the back of the waist if you get involved on the inside of the belly, the drawing up feeling. The knees can help. If you can breathe into these areas, the back of the waist and the back of the neck, from the purchase that you make with the ground in the ribs, then the release of the breath, and this is, if you're watching, watch closely, the release of the breath can be from the spine dropping, the deflation within the lungs, the letting go to the point of contact, which is the ribs, allows you to drop the spine into extension. It becomes a possibility. I'll do it with my hands the other way around so you can see. So if we can breathe into the back of the waist and the back of the neck, from the contact you make with the ground in the ribs, the diaphragm and the abdominal muscles, the ribs themselves will be involved in making you float. When you release the breath, you release the diaphragm, so you let go. But if you can do so towards where you touch the ground in the ribs, there's a potential for the spine from the bump of the base of the neck down to sink through your shoulders. And the result of it doing so means that you're supported directly by the release of the spine. And you'll notice some muscles because we're not used to using the extensor muscles around that area. But essentially, this is the beginning of where the neck starts. One of my teachers, Pete Blackaby, he talks about the horse's neck. It starts sort of somewhere between the shoulder blades, and that's how the head comes up, because that bit of spine drops through. But how to make that happen, I was mystified for many, many years. Basically, you need to give the middle of your body, the core, the ribs, the central breathing responses, you need to give that the responsibility of carrying your head rather than the neck muscles. And then you get a chance to drop the spine from the bump of the base of the neck down through to the touch. So it's not a big posture, but what you've got is a sort of confluence of the spine where both ends of the body are light because the upper spine is dropping through. So, and when you've got that, movement is relatively simple. You release into that relationship to the earth from the spine, and in that moment of dropping, you can simply change position, and the upper spine will be connected through the body to your touch. And provided you're not trying to push your pelvis down, you should get space away from the ground along the front line of the spine from the way you're touching the ground with your hands. And then the spine itself, especially if you play with inner to outer touch, and then back from that, allows the heart to be pulled forwards and through so that you can come up from underneath rather than lifting. Yes. Cobra. Have I got time? Not really. You don't have to be an extension to release the upper spine. It's not the only situation. What you need is the two ends of the body to be allowing it. But it only works if you're supported in the middle. The two ends of the body being allowing extension. So the head and the pelvis. Most people hold their heads down, hold their pelvises down. If you can let that go, again, when you let it go, most people will sag through and not feel supported. So what we need to find is a sense of support from the touch of the ground, at the solar plexus, at the middle, underneath the heart, and support as you rest the throat through to the hands. It wants to feel like you're dangling through, but the eyes looking up inside the head helps allow the head to join in with the heart opening up. The pelvis releasing back and up on the inside allows the heart to extend. And if we feel supported in the front of the body at the same time, which comes from the way we contact the ground, so hands on knees and feet, then you can drop from the heart into your touch. So breathe feeling supported in these areas, back of the waist, back of the neck, and as you release the breath, you drop the spine with your touch. And the result is the upper spine comes through with the release of the breath directly into your contact, and your contact supports you. So you can open from the heart without necessarily extending. It's possible. It's about getting the spine to relate to what you're doing, essentially. And there's other tricks you can do. I talk about embrace and other things, So that'll do. That's a good 20 minutes. That went quickly, probably because I was nattering a bit at the beginning. But yes, I hope that was helpful. What I'm doing these days with these yoga solutions is that there's still loads of them left online, but one by one I will gradually go through and remove them from the group, because I'm putting them on my website for members. I'm trying to work out a thing where you can join as a silver member on my website to get access to all of these. I'm trying to work out a way of doing that for free for a few months or a few weeks or something. It's very cheap anyway. It's $4.99 a month. You can sign up and you get the sort of slightly edited versions where I take out some of the faff and yes. So anyway, but in the meantime, this will be up for probably a week. If it depends on how quick I am to get round to admin. I sometimes do a little 5-minute version of it, and I edit it down to just the the basics to keep putting out there. But in the meantime, whilst it is up, feel free to spread it around to anyone that might be of interest, who might find it interesting or useful. Anyone with neck and shoulder problems, basically, or anyone that feels stiff in the upper back. And things that are happening. I've got the last of the autumn series, Yoga Solutions workshops, one in Brighton, Sunday the 8th of December, which is not far off now. Come along, it's Unit 4 in Brighton, Pete Blackaby's place, 10:30 till 4:30 p.m. And this one's about letting go, but letting go into the natural rhythm of things, not the general idea of letting go, which is collapse. Learning how to let go into a positive outcome, the thing that we want to happen. 8th of December in Brighton, and the following Saturday, which is the 14th of December, I will be at In the Moment in Glasgow. This will be the last of the open yoga solutions workshops for this year. I've not worked out what I'm doing next year yet. I'm getting a bit wrapped up with my online stuff, so that might take precedence. Other things. You can already get access to the Haptic Intelligence course now. It's the recordings are all up, and if you purchase it, you get to go through the recordings at your own pace in your own home, which is always very welcome for people. But you also get with it free one-to-ones with me, as well as email support and that sort of thing. So you can already purchase that and take part in the Haptic Intelligence course. I'd thoroughly advise it. You get a certificate at the end if you complete, and you can get it if you feel you've got a good overview of how the thing works and gain some benefit from it. Then you can get a certificate of attendance that you can use. The next sensory intelligence course that I will be doing will be Proprioceptive Intelligence, the Proprioceptive Intelligence Series, and I will be doing an introductory workshop on that to give the general overview of what proprioception is about, where we are in space, the part of our nervous system that maps out the space around us and where things are relative to each other. And again, like our touch, there is a sort of feedback relationship to it that has been colored by history, by experience, by learning. It's been colored and distorted by the things that we have imposed upon our physical experience. And the idea of the series, like the Haptic Intelligence course that involved ourselves with contact, the idea of the series is to recalibrate our relationship, our physical relationships to the space around us, to get to the point where once again we are supported by space. I know it sounds vague, but it's but what I'm talking about is not space doing the support, it's our relationship to it that changes, that can change our somatic experience of the whole body. And it's the second part of my sort of fundamental principle of practice. And you can do it in isolation because it's impossible to be in space without having contact, and the way you relate to space will influence how you make contact with the earth. Those of you that have already attended the Haptic Intelligence course will gain an exponentially broader benefit from the second course. But again, if you start with a proprioceptive course and then go on to doing the Haptic Intelligence course, then you'll get exponentially expanded experience out of being with your touch. So these first two at least can be done independently. I would advise doing both at some point. But if you're interested in that, I've got a list of people that are committed to doing it. And they get the first live places. But what I will be doing is I'll be offering an open workshop in December online, and it'll just be limited by the number of places I can make on the app, on the Zoom app. I think it's, I don't know how many it is, but you can purchase that, and it'll be a very good price. I'll make it cheap, price of a little bit more than the price of a class, and yes, that can act as a deposit on the course if you choose to continue. So if you do carry on, then that amount will be taken off the full price of the course. The course itself runs from January 2020, goes on for 6 weeks, weekly sessions, an hour and a half. It's an hour of practice or so. Half an hour is taken up with checking in with where people are at, answering questions and that sort of thing. So it's a full package, and the structure of the thing is to lead you to an entirely brand new somatic experience of yourself, along with some tools to help yourself and other people get there. So anyway, yes, you need to have done the introductory to join the full course. So either way, sign up for the intro once I've got the details up. I haven't actually put it on the website yet, so that will come soon. But yes, if you're definitely interested in the course, drop me a line, and because I've got a list of people that definitely want to do it, and yes, if you want first refusal, then you need to get yourself on that list. Okay, I think that'll do for now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope my yoga solutions have been useful for you, and I shall see you the same time, same place next week. I've been Marc J Acquaviva of the Acquaviva School of Yoga, signing off. Lots of love to you all. Bye now.